So hello, I'm Brian Newby. I'm the Executive Director of the EAC, and we're starting this session a little bit later, and if you see on your program on page 2, I think the staff may have been suggesting something to me that this session's scheduled from 3 to 3. So it's like, Brian, you'll be on from 3 to 3. But if you look at the front page, I would say that Summit Planner intent would suggest 3:30. So that will be what will be after today. And we're going to open it up for questions, but as you're preparing your arm to see how fast you can be the first to raise your hand, I thought I'd tee up a first question to Chairman Masterson. And that is just really, we've had a very good day today so far, I'd say. And we're looking to 2018. That is a definite theme. 2018 is what we want to target here. Looking to 2018, what is the biggest takeaway you would like to see maybe people take out of the meeting so far today?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you all for sticking it out. I actually thought I was done at 3, so I was ready to head out, but apparently not. No, my big takeaway, in part because of the panel on cybersecurity and moderating that, is the need for a coordinated one nation response to the current threat environment that we're operating in. It can't be just a governmental response on the side of federal, state, and local officials. It can't just be advice given by those who are interested or engaged, but it needs to be a coordinated effort by working, communicating, and identifying where resources are available and getting those resources down to those who run the elections. It's incumbent on us at the EAC, I think, as well as folks out taking advantage of these resources to share the resources that you have available with your colleagues and make available to them whatever is out there so that they can decide what can best help them secure their systems and improve the overall cyber posture. So for me, the takeaway is everyone in this room has a joint responsibility to help coordinate that national response to the current threat environment.
I have 2 things. One, that lawsuits should be used as a last resort, that there should be some sort of solution that can be raised, but that means actually talking to each individual together. So if you're in the room together, that starts that process. And it's not a them versus us mentality. It's a how can we work to improve the process. That's the first thing I took away. The other thing that I took away, and that was from Dr. Stewart this morning, was that things are improving. We're not necessarily where we should be, but things are improving. And so as we move forward, the EAC should be there to help improve that process with all our stakeholders. So those are the 2 things that I took away.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of things too. I would say, in light of my panel on the data, look at all your processes and see where you can collect data to make your process and your voter experience more efficient and work on the integrity of your elections. And I think most of our election officials would like to do that. Some of them don't have the resources to do it or the office depth of staff to do it. But I think it is important for us to look at data and how we can make our elections better. The other thing is communications, whether it's communications with voters who need to know what the processes are. They need to know how they actually work. I can remember the first time I ever walked into an election warehouse and how overwhelmed I was. What a huge, huge job this is. And most voters, I don't think, understand that. I think most people don't understand it. They think you roll a machine out of a closet once a year, you take a vote, roll it back in, and that's that. So I think there's a fundamental need for communication. And then transparency with allow the voters to come in, be poll workers, let them know when you're going to be doing logistics and accuracy testing on voting systems, if they can participate in audits at all. I think the more that the general public is involved in the system, the more they're going to trust it.
So we have EAC staff members, I think, at the microphone ready to run to your raised arm for questions for the commissioners. Yes, right.
Well, I think one of my takeaways had to do with the educational process in building trust, that the threat to our elections in part was citizens' trust in the process. And so I'm wondering, in terms of educating and building confidence in the system, if you have any plans, for example, to take this summit on the road and to refine, to expand some of the issues into the areas where trust is lacking, for example, in the recount process or the audit process, and other processes that obviously are extensive, and take this process, this summit concept on the road so that you can educate citizens in every state who have an interest in this. Because clearly, you know, the interest in this is growing and growing and growing. I've been in this movement effort for many years now, and I've never seen such growth. It's quite incredible, really, and I think we might be on the verge of one of the largest civil rights movements in terms of election integrity and election processes that I've seen.
First, thank you for your comment. I agree. I think the election officials I've talked to that lived through 2016 administering elections, one of the encouraging parts for them, I think, was the level of interest that folks were digging into their practices and procedures, and they took a great deal of pride in opening up their operations and showing how they work. And so to your suggestion, I think at the EAC we've been working very hard and we'll continue to explore ways to bring the process to people, which is what you're saying, right? To educate. I was recently out in Arapahoe County, Colorado for their risk limiting audit, and they did such an amazing job, not just showing us the audit, but allowing us to participate in it and learn it and see how they were administering that audit. And so the more of those experiences we could share with the public and reach, those who know me know I talk frequently about Sherrill and Jackson County, Ohio, which is a tiny county in Ohio. How do we reach voters and election officials in those small counties across this country to better educate and do that? And so I think the more ways we engage, whether it's summits like this, videos, trainings, you know, having folks go out to meetings, that's our role and something that we'll continue to push forward on. I appreciate that suggestion a lot.
Other questions?
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
in about 5 days, we will celebrate being at the agency for 3 years, the three of us together. And I think in those 3 years, we have gone around this world collectively in the airline miles that we've put together several times. So we are taking this on the road for anyone who wants to listen to us speak about any of these issues. So we've spoken at many state conferences. I've spoken to many disability groups. We'll go anywhere and everywhere that we can. We don't have a huge budget, but we have a small travel budget to get out there and talk to American people. Doug Chapin talked a little bit earlier about how we have a lot of responsibilities but not a lot of authority, which is true. And that's the way that Congress made this bill. But it also made it so that we can serve as a clearinghouse. And not a lot of folks know about these resources that we have to better improve the election process. So at our website, eac.gov, which we redid last March, we have a lot of those resources on there. But we're also doing all we can to just serve as a bully pulpit, to let folks know that there's no evidence that any votes were changed during the election process. So the people I've talked to have said to me, why should I vote if my vote's going to be changed? Well, if you don't vote, your vote is not going to count. So get out there, do your civic duty, cast your ballot, and serve as a poll worker is what I always say to folks. So we're doing our best to get that information out there, and hopefully we can continue that on. But I think that's an excellent question, and thank you for it.
I thought you were going to say after the 3 years comment that we should all say
I'm
something
out.
nice about each other. I know that face.
Dave Berkey, City of Falls Church, General Registrar and Director of Elections in Virginia. We are right across the river, and we get to have the benefit of coming to these things because we're so close, and therefore we get a voice. One of the issues that I have been noticing about elections, especially as the interest has grown in the last year, election administrators know, you all know, elections are complex. Voters, however, expect elections to be simple. It's the foundation. It's supposed to be you show up, you raise your hand, you get counted, you're done. It's supposed to be simple, but it's very complex. And I think the conversation might need to move to, do we need to make it easier and simpler? Or do we need to change the expectation of the voter to understand that it is complex, that in 50 states there are 50 different ways of casting a vote, and just because we're becoming more and more transient as a nation, people are moving more to cities, moving to new places where the elections are different, and we're getting questions. Every time a California voter comes into my office and says, how come you didn't mail that sample ballot to me? And I have to explain that, well, Virginia actually doesn't have that kind of budget that California decided to have to do those kinds of things. So the expectations of voters that it be simple is where I think these conversations need to begin. Thank you so much for this summit. It has been extremely educational.
I want to clarify one thing. A former California voter who's now in Virginia.
Thank you for that clarification.
Well, David, I would say that we have to do both. I think we have to educate voters and try to make the process simple for them. One of the things that I experienced was a year in Baghdad, in Iraq, and served alongside people who were from every state in the country. When it came to voting, everybody had a different process, and that was extremely confusing. People would say, oh, no, I can't do that, or I can do that. I mean, we need to work on enfranchising people because of those problems and making sure that they don't not vote because they're confused by the process. But they also have to understand that we do have 55 separate election jurisdictions, at least as far as states and territories, and that we do have different rules in different places, and it is up to the states to run the elections. But we have to do whatever we can to educate people and to make it easy for them to vote and believe in their vote, to have confidence that their vote's going to be counted.
Hillary.
Hi, Hillary Hall from Boulder County, Colorado. First, thanks for tagging this on with the Election Center Conference. It made it possible for some of us who can't attend these things in person to do so. My question's on the kind of the hot topic around security. So I know we've only been into a year with the Department of Homeland Security, and they're working really hard at the state level. And as a local election official, I have an election coming up in June, and I have, of course, one in November. Can you give top 3 tips of how does someone who's not going to those committees and hearing all those things firsthand and has a day job, how do we get that information, and where do we plug in the quickest and most effectively and efficiently?
Sure. So awesome question, important question, right? Because in the end, the information, the services need to get down to you. So there's a variety of ways that I recommend. One is we'll give it to you, right? We have a lot of that information. I'll follow up with you after this conference, and we can share with you how to plug into the information that's being shared and whatnot. The second is Judge Choate, State Election Director in Colorado, is on the GCC, and I'm sure can share that with you as well. I know the Homeland Security folks in your state or assigned to your state, as the Deputy Undersecretary was talking about, will work with you as a county as well. So they have services that they can work with you to do. They were focused on the states initially, but to the extent that you want to look at the menu of services that they have and maybe take advantage of some of those, I know they'll happily talk to you about that. And so the starting point for you, I think, is you and I will talk after this, and then I'll make sure you have the information you need. We have information up on our website about this as well, how to explore it at eac.gov. And Brenda would be mad if I didn't say it. But I'll make sure you have it, and that goes for anyone in the audience. And then at the core of what the GCC is doing right now, Government Coordinating Council, is doing right now is setting up the information sharing protocols as far as known threats or risks that folks may be seeing in order to ensure that all 50 states and the locals are able to receive it. And so that's formal information sharing protocols are being developed now to ensure that you do get that information or are able to act on it.
Ms. Goodman.
We'll switch to this side.
Hi, I'm Susanna Goodman. With respect to the airline miles and traveling around the world, I was wondering, in terms of cybersecurity, we're not the only nation that has been under threat. Our NATO allies, are just as much danger as we are, and have been responding in different ways, going to paper, going to hand counting, shutting down internet voting. What have you guys learned in your world travels? Your top takeaways from, I'm just really interested in your perspective on not just our NATO allies, in other countries as well.
So one of the things, I attended a conference in The Hague this summer, and there were a number of democracies there that talked about the threats that they face in terms of voting as well. But none of them were really focused in on of reverting back. They wanted to say, hey, we can look at some more security features and things like that, but what sort of things can we do to ensure that our citizens can still cast their ballots? They have a lot more resources and things than the U.S. government puts into elections themselves, and a lot more restrictions as well. But for the most part, I think that this is a continuing threat for the U.S. in terms of 2018, 2020, and beyond. But I think of it as things change, the security measures need to change as well. So, we're not going towards internet voting anytime soon, but I think that there is a way to, as we are looking towards redoing the VVSG 2.0, there are security measures that are put in there as well to talk about what sort of things should manufacturers look towards when they go to get their system certified. So, as we look back on 2000, the election is run differently now than it was 15, 20 years ago. So as we move forward, the elections are going to be run differently in 20 years. So as the elections evolve, security features should evolve as well.
And I would say one of the things I've learned is that American elections are unlike any other elections in the world. We have a much different system. It is run by the local registrars and election directors in the states. We don't have a centralized federal system. That makes our challenges quite different from other countries in the world who are facing these same issues. So that's something that we have to look at and try to gear our response toward is going to be different than other countries do. I mean, certainly we can learn from each other and how we can respond to some of these concerns, but we have to keep in mind that our system is completely different.
Amber McReynolds, I'm the Director of Elections in Denver. Thanks for having this. I think it's fantastic, and I agree. I think taking it on the road further to get out further in the country is fantastic. My question is sort of touches on a little bit of what came up, but being from a state that has a significant amount of people moving into it from all parts of the country, and they're coming into our model, which is ballot delivery and vote centers. We are getting thank you notes from voters in their ballot packets coming from other places. But what it has highlighted for me in a big way, we also have election day and same day registration. We have a very connected statewide system and can, manage all those cross changes. But I think the interconnectedness and the transient nature of just the country generally has very much highlighted these huge disparities and frankly confusing policies and practices that are across the board that all are solvable through data-driven policy changes. And so I think like common data format work, some of what Eric has done, I think what it has done is it's highlighted that much of our issues that we deal with from a customer service perspective or voters voting provisionals or whatever it is has to do with varying deadlines state to state for registration, varying precinct deadlines, varying residency deadlines, where someone's eligibility in one state may vary greatly from somebody's in the next state over. So I don't know if you want to maybe just talk about your thoughts on that, because it seems to me that that's the most obvious way to improve a lot of the challenges that voters face, just purely in the registration side of things, because if they don't get registered successfully, it really doesn't matter. Once we get to the voting process, that registration part seems to be kind of the bedrock of much of what we do. So just maybe get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll take a piece of it since you're the first one to bring up today, common data format. Thank you. But the ease and exchange of data across or within jurisdictions is critical, and actually has gotten a lot better over the last decade, right? When we first started collecting EVES data, even within a jurisdiction, getting that data either complete or consistently was almost impossible. And so an effort that we've been involved in, obviously, is developing the common data format to ease that exchange of data, to encourage that ability to exchange data both within your state or otherwise. And I think what you'll see, because the trend's already headed that direction, is exactly that, the ability to analyze and exchange data across election jurisdictions to educate voters, to improve services for voters, just to improve the overall information, right? Allowing people to look up where they can vote and whatnot. That's gotten so much better over the last 5-7 years, thanks to efforts like VIP, and I think you'll just see that grow as the technology improves to support it.
Yeah, and I would say that, Michael Scarpello said earlier, he has a huge county, and he sees different voters behaving in different ways in different places. As we know, every election is different in every jurisdiction for every election. We don't do the same election over and over again, but this underscores the importance of sharing information, the National Clearinghouse, getting best practices out there, and sharing those so that folks can update their processes. I think one of the things that's sorely needed in the country is a review of all the state election laws and procedures. A lot of them are very old. Technology has made them obsolete, and I think we need a real review of our election laws and our processes, and I don't know how we do that, but I think the states really need to start tackling that issue.
I don't know if I should introduce myself as the deputy of Arapahoe County or as voting geek, but I have a question. So we were reminded today about Florida in 2000 and the policy changes that came from that being very public and the funding that came with that. And then we've talked a lot about the security issues that we faced this last year. And again, we saw a lot of amazing things because that was so public. We have the Governing Coordinating Council. The EAC came up with this great glossary of terms to quickly help us become cybersecurity experts. We have a lot of sharing of information, as we heard today, from different entities. Is there merit for the EAC to, well, let me back up. We try really hard as election administrators to make sure we're always pointing out all of the really great positive things that are happening and all of the improvements that are taking place, but is there merit in the EAC either guiding us or helping us maybe pull back the curtain on some of the other issues that we face collectively and making those public in a way that might help drive further change, such as the struggle that we have to secure polling locations that are big enough and accessible, or some of the issues that we deal with in Colorado with registration changes and updates and those sorts of things. So have you given any thought to sort of what's the next big issue that you would like to tackle, or maybe help you bring our stories to the public so that we can get those policy changes or that funding that we need?
I would say it's going to be an all-hands-on-deck process. I mean, the researchers are good at bringing up the problems that we have, and I think the EAC is looking at some of those things as well, and we do, because of our interaction with the state and local election officials, we do hear some of the problems, and we do see the threads that run through the different states, and so we're in a interesting position in that we can see what's happening throughout the country rather than just an isolated area. So I think we are looking at that. I think our staff is looking at some of that as well. Obviously, the big thing right now is the cybersecurity and the threats against our system. And I think we just have to keep chipping away at each issue that comes up and how we can best respond to it. So I think yes, through a lot of the work that we do, we are doing that. But you're right. We probably should do more.
The answer is yes. And part of what your question suggests to me is the need to identify, we're focused on some pretty complex, challenging problems, but have we identified or helped identify and help you all deal with some of the simpler problems that are the larger issues for you, like polling places? That's simply a challenge of finding and identifying places you can actually use, right? And how do we help educate, get in touch with county commissioners or legislators or whoever else to help ease that burden and communicate that on a more national level using data, right? utilize the information we have at our fingertips to help do that. And so the answer is yes. How do we? You have to help us identify where those challenges lie, and then it's incumbent on us to help work through those with you. Honestly, I look at auditing. So at this point, auditing has become an expected practice, right? So now the conversations move to efficient auditing, and you all go and do your risk limiting audits. How can the EAC begin to work with the community as a whole, election officials and otherwise, to identify efficient auditing practices, and then share that information about what's working, what's not working, why it's working, to allow you guys to make the decisions about what works best for your operations, right? As we see that evolve and improve. We went from, do we need to audit, don't we? Now we're at, yes, we need to audit, but what are the best ways? And so those are the types of challenges in front of us.
So yes, someone said a little earlier that there's 170,000 plus polling places around this country on election day. The odds of all those places not having one incident at all are very minor. So in 2000, we talked about hanging chads. 2004, it was long lines. 2008, long lines again. 2012, it was Hurricane Sandy. 2016, it was the Russian meddling. What's 2020 going to be like? We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. But I think that as we move forward, as long as the election officials and public are working together to facilitate that no votes are being changed, I think that that's a positive aspect. We have our EVE survey out in the hallway there that I would tell folks to make sure you get a copy of. We don't have many left. So if you get a chance, get that copy of that. It's on our website for those at home. Look through that data, and as problems come up, we're going to come up with solutions, hopefully.
So if I could, from an EAC staff perspective, kind of use that to transition a couple things. So one, I believe that I would say as a former election official, polling places are not a simpler issue. Just want to say that. That is a thing, but I think one of the things we've tried very hard to do this year is make it real. That was a EAC initiative, and to make our information relevant. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing spoke to you, and so that wouldn't just, we hope it has. We hope that today's event is indicative of that, and we want to continue that for 18, so we definitely would like to get feedback if there are things that we should be focused on that we aren't. I do think we're kind of running towards the end. We have probably time for one more question, and then we might have one wrap up here. So is there one last question? It is. I would give one shout out to our staff. One thing, I just think they've done a terrific job today, a tremendous job. Thank all of you for attending. I think if you have questions, look at eac.gov. I would turn now to the chairman, Matt Masterson, for a final word.
No incredible wisdom to share except for thank you to the staff. Thank you to my fellow commissioners and the panelists and you all for being here. The comment was made, it's obvious the level of engagement because of the amount of people here, right? And so the challenge for all of us, whether you're an election administrator, a member of the public, an activist, an academic, is to remain engaged with each other, to work together to solve these problems. There are big challenges, but there are a lot of great people working to solve and tackle those challenges. And so it's incumbent now that all of you have met and been in a room together to work together to tackle these challenges and solve some of these problems. So that's the message I hope you leave here today with is to find a way to buddy up. I feel like we should have the election officials raise their hand so you can identify who needs the help and support. But just go out and conquer and take on these challenges head on. We'll be ready to go for 2018. I got no doubt about that. No, stop. You stop. Invest. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you.